Hey folks, Timber Drifter again. So, although I'm about done smoking this pipe, I guess I'm not done talking about it. It's right down at the bottom of the bowl. That's just about it. These are kind of hard to smoke right down to the bottom because of the shape. This is actually a little thicker here than it would appear. It's thicker down here than it is at the rim, so the bottom of the bowl has kind of a thin sort of horn shape to it. It's difficult to smoke them all the way down. And it's about done anyway. So, I better look around here. No, alright, I don't see any smoke, so I'm good to go for another few minutes. But, yeah, if you haven't tried smoking a clay pipe, I recommend getting a hold of one. There's quite a few variations. Obviously they were made for several hundred years, so at least a couple hundred years. Yeah, we'll say several hundred years. Anyway, there's a lot of variations on them, and I'll make another couple, at least one more video talking about clay pipes. But like I said, it's kind of an interesting smoke. The closest thing to it is meerschaum. Smoking a thin meerschaum pipe is very similar to smoking a clay, but it's still different. There's a taste that all clays have, unless they're glazed. That's just different. Kind of like a new meerschaum pipe has a taste for the first 10-20 smokes. Clay always has that taste. It always has a sort of minerally taste at the beginning of the smoke or when it gets too hot. But it also gives a really clean taste. You know, tobacco is, like this tobacco for instance, tastes quite different in this pipe, even though it's been smoked a lot, than it does in a briar pipe. And I really don't like aromatic tobaccos in clay pipes. For me, it just doesn't work. They always come out tasting really harsh, or any of the ones I tried anyway. But these things were, you know, super cheap, a penny a dozen, back when they were common, and that's why they find so many of them in archaeological digs. They're not uncommon. I've seen pictures from rivers in England where it was like a steam shovel, you know, or not a steam shovel, but a big piece of equipment, a steel shovel pulling mud, dredging the canals out, and it's just, the mud is just completely littered with broken clay pipes. Super common. And like I mentioned earlier in the last video, the way to clean these is to burn them out. Drop them in coals and let them burn all the stuff out. But they also used to use split chicken feathers like we use pipe cleaners. I've tried that with some of my pipes. This one is too tight for that. But years ago I actually tried splitting down, I think they were pheasant feathers actually that I used. But trying to ream out a pipe with split feathers, that's a little different. That's old school. Yeah, I also mentioned in the last video that cigars weren't as common. We know a whole lot about what people were smoking, eating, and drinking back then because of the trade records, as far as what was coming in on ships, what was being traded overland. That stuff, well, any of it that went through legal means, of course, was taxed. and orders. There's all that stuff is recorded during the Mountain Man period, from the early 1820s to the 1840s. All the stuff that went out to the rendezvous, the trapper gatherings they used to have once or twice a year in the mountains, so the trappers could resupply without coming all the way back to civilization. All the stuff they sent out there was recorded. And cigars were around, but obviously cigars are harder to ship. They're considerably more fragile. They weren't using humidors back then, so cigars are a lot more fragile than twist tobacco, which is primarily what was around, or plug tobacco. So most people were smoking pipes, and a lot of people smoked. In fact, a lot of the skulls that are found in the East have what's called a pipe notch in the teeth. Because this is an abrasive material, if you hold one of these in your teeth while you're plowing or doing whatever, over time it actually wears away the teeth into a notch, top and bottom. So I've seen a picture of one skull that had a notch on each side. Wasn't missing teeth, they were actually rounded out. And that got me to thinking, since we use ceramic abrasives to sharpen knives these days, I had, many years ago thought you could probably put a pretty fine edge on a knife by using a pipe. So what I had done with this one was flattened the seam. There was a seam here, you can see it on the bowl. I'd flattened it out here to make a short flat surface, and that's what I've done. I've put a fine edge on quite a few knives that way, and I can only assume that at least one person figured that out back then. It was probably more common than we think. But that's just the kind of stuff you figure out when you use materials that people used to use, And this is like what I was talking about in the last video would be considered a period correct knife as far as the materials and the means of manufacture. This is a piece of antler. This is pewter, and you'll notice that there aren't any pens like with this one. The tang of the knife, here we go, it's called a sprue tang, and it gets narrow and travels through a hole in the handle, and then the bottom of the tang is peened over this pewter plate here. Well, that could be steel actually, I'm not sure, but anyway, it's peened over. You can see the hammer marks, and that's what holds it there, and it's quite tight. I've used this knife for years and it's never loosened up at all. But you can see this is definitely pewter. It's cast around there, and this knife is made by Tim Ridge, Swamp Fox Forge in Tennessee. That's his mark. There's a TR in the Fox. Excellent knife. I bought this knife in 2002, maybe? Could have been 2003. And I've used it extensively. It's an excellent knife for butchering or meat carving or eating with, fork and knife, or just eating right off the knife. It's got a good point for piercing. It's a relatively thick blade with a distal taper, which means it gets narrower from the base all the way to the tip. It is hand forged. And at the time I paid $180 for this knife. They're considerably more expensive than that now. And this knife is meant to look like it's been used. You'll see that it has the appearance of being a little bit sharpened away there. I didn't do that. I bought the knife that way. It looks like a relic, It's a beautiful knife. This is the sheath. You'll notice it doesn't have a belt loop. It has this flap here because it would have been slipped over a belt or a sash, held that way. And you could have tied it on also. It's got a leather thong. You could tie it onto your belt or sash. But yeah, this is a good outdoors type knife, especially in cold weather if you're going to be butchering large game. I prefer a longer knife to keep this hand from getting bloody in cold weather, because that'll just numb your hand right away. I don't do a lot of large game hunting, very rarely, but I like the knife anyway. It looks like a lot of original examples with the way the handle is narrow here, but I actually prefer a thicker handle, which is why when I made this knife, I made it a lot wider through here and also thicker this way. I don't get any hand fatigue using it. But this knife figured prominently into the creation of this knife. This one and about 3 other knives that I've used extensively, I kind of took all the qualities that I liked about those knives and made this knife. And this is one that I've been using for, I don't know, about maybe 3 years now, and it does what I want it to do. If I'm out in the woods, I pretty much always got this one with me. And also, the grind of this knife is convex. It's not flat ground or hollow ground, it's convex. You may be able to see that a little bit. Which is better for cleaving. You don't tear your edge up so much. This knife is also convex, just a bit. Your edge will last longer if you have a thin convex grind. Now, I don't want to start an argument. People have plenty of opinions about that. That's just mine. If you want to start an argument with knife folks, start talking about the way knives are ground. But anyway, I'm going to pack another bowl. Keep smoking and keep dreaming about, thinking about being out in the woods, which I'll be doing plenty of camping soon enough. I've got a long canoe trip planned for this summer. I like doing canoe trips because you can take a little bit more stuff than you can if you're carrying it all on your back. Still won't be taking very much stuff because I only have a 12-foot canoe. It's got, I think it's a 450 pound or 550 pound limit. I want to go lighter than that, so I've got plenty of canoe above water if I hit rough water. I weigh about 225 pounds right now, so I'm not going to be able to bring that much gear with me, but still considerably more than I could comfortably carry on my back. So I'll be doing plenty of sleeping out under the stars and cooking outside and all that stuff before too long here. But that's not going to keep me from fantasizing about it right now while I'm up in my tower. Looking for smokes. Smoking. All right, take care.